She became a human's wife and discovered a shocking truth on their first night. Jason never imagined that his life would take such an unexpected turn. He was a simple man, living in a small town on Earth, until the day the Viral arrived. The Viral were an advanced alien species, known for their long lives and even longer history. Their technology was unmatched, and their empire stretched across galaxies. But despite all their power, they were a peaceful species, seeking only alliances to protect their future. Jason had been selected for a task he never asked for, to marry one of the Viral, solidifying an intergalactic peace treaty between the humans and the Viral. It seemed impossible at first, but it was an offer he couldn't refuse. The marriage wasn't about love. It was about politics, about saving Earth from a future war. He was chosen because of his ordinary background, someone who wouldn't stand out. No one on Earth knew of his special role. The woman he was to marry was Lyra, a noblewoman from the Viral. She was beautiful, graceful, and strong, everything Jason wasn't used to. She stood tall with a regal presence, her alien features both intimidating and captivating. Her skin shimmered with a faint glow, and her long silver hair flowed like liquid light. Jason felt out of place next to her, but he was determined to make the best of it. His task was simple: marry her, keep the peace, and return to Earth. Their wedding took place on the Viral's homeworld, a planet known for its crystal-clear skies and vast cities made of shining metal. The ceremony was grand, attended by dignitaries from all over the galaxy. Jason, in his simple suit, felt like an outsider in the sea of shining, majestic beings. He looked at Lyra as she walked down the aisle, her eyes cold yet piercing. There was something about her that made him uneasy, but he couldn't deny the strange pull she had on him. After the ceremony, they were led to their private quarters. The room was beautiful, decorated in a way that only someone from an advanced civilization could manage. The walls seemed to shimmer with soft blue light, and the bed was enormous, made of a material Jason couldn't even begin to understand. But as grand as everything was, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Lyra entered the room silently, her movements graceful, as though she was part of the very air around her. Jason sat down on the edge of the bed, unsure of what to do. He had never been in a situation like this. He wasn't a prince or a king. He was just a regular guy who had been thrust into a world he couldn't understand. Lyra stood by the window, her back to him. She didn't speak for a long time, and Jason wondered if she was thinking the same thing as he was. This wasn't a marriage of love. It was a political arrangement, and they both knew it. Still, Jason couldn't help but feel a little nervous. He had no idea how to act, how to behave around her. He wasn't sure what she expected, but he hoped he could at least meet her expectations. Finally, Lyra spoke, her voice calm but with an edge of authority. "You may find this arrangement difficult, Jason, but you must understand it is for the greater good of both our people. The alliance must be sealed, and our marriage is part of that. Do not expect affection from me, as I do not have any to give." Jason nodded. "I understand," he replied, his voice soft. "I know this isn't about love, but I'll do my part. I'll keep the peace." Lyra turned to face him then, her eyes narrowing slightly. She studied him for a moment, as if trying to read his thoughts. Then, with a small sigh, she sat down beside him. There was a strange tension in the air, a tension that neither of them could ignore. Lyra seemed distant, like she was somewhere far away in her mind, and Jason felt like an intruder in his own marriage. "I should tell you, Jason," Lyra said slowly, "that our people, we are not like yours. We have different customs, different ways of seeing the world. I will not pretend that this is easy for me either, but I am doing my duty." Jason was quiet for a moment, unsure of what to say. "I know you're doing your duty, Lyra. I don't want to make things harder for you. I'll try to adjust, I promise." Lyra nodded but said nothing more. She looked at him again, her gaze softening just a little. There was something in her eyes that Jason couldn't quite place, something like curiosity or maybe something deeper. But she quickly looked away, and the moment passed. The silence between them grew heavier, and Jason could feel his nerves getting the best of him. He had no idea what he was supposed to do next. The marriage was supposed to be a formality, but now that they were alone, it felt like so much more. His heart raced as he glanced at Lyra, wondering if she was feeling the same way. Would she expect him to take the next step, to be more than just a political partner? But before he could say anything, Lyra stood up, her expression unreadable. "I need some time alone," she said softly. "There are things I must consider. Please rest. We will speak more tomorrow." Jason watched her walk to the far side of the room, her back straight, her movements fluid. He wasn't sure if it was disappointment or relief he felt. Maybe both. He lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts racing. What was he really getting into? Was he just a pawn in a game too big for him to understand? The night stretched on, and Jason couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Lyra, about her beauty, her strength, and the coldness in her eyes. He had agreed to this marriage for the good of humanity, but deep down, he knew there was something more at play. He didn't know what it was yet, but he had the feeling that his life had changed forever, and he had no idea what was going to happen next. As the first rays of light began to shine through the windows, Jason heard Lyra moving around the room. She was dressed in her usual attire, silk robes that seemed to shimmer with a light of their own. She walked past him without a word, and Jason could feel the weight of the silence between them. There was no turning back now. He had no choice but to accept this new reality, this strange new world. Lyra finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "We will begin our duties tomorrow, Jason. Do not forget your role. We have a future to secure." Jason nodded, but his mind was still racing. The peace they were supposed to create between their people seemed so fragile now. It wasn't just about politics. There was something deeper happening between them, something neither of them had expected. He didn't know what the future held, but he was certain of one thing. This marriage was just the beginning. Lyra woke up early the next morning, the soft glow of the sun filtering through the large windows. She had slept only a few hours, but she didn't feel tired. There was something unsettling in the air, something she couldn't shake. The night before, she had been distant from Jason, retreating into herself when she should have been getting to know him. She felt a deep sense of duty to her people and their cause, but there was also a part of her that felt a strange connection to him. It troubled her. As she walked across the room, her eyes caught a glimpse of Jason still sleeping on the bed. His face was peaceful, his features soft, but she couldn't forget the truth of who he really was. A human, yes, but more than just a regular human. His lineage was tied to something much older, something that her people feared. She had learned it last night, hidden in the chamber of their room, tucked away behind a secret door. Jason wasn't just any man. He was part of an ancient bloodline, one that had once helped her ancestors win a great war. His family's blood had been diluted over generations, and he had no memory of this past. Lyra stood by the window, lost in thought. She knew that their marriage was essential for peace between their two species. It was the only way to ensure that Earth remained safe and that the viral didn't destroy them. But now, things were more complicated. Jason wasn't just a simple Earthman. He was part of an ancient prophecy that foretold the return of a leader who would unite the viral and humans if he could overcome the dangerous legacy that came with his name. She sighed and turned back to the bed. Jason was beginning to stir. His eyes slowly opened and he blinked, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. His gaze landed on her, and for a brief moment their eyes met. He looked confused, unsure of how to start the day, just as he had been the night before. "Good morning," Jason said softly, his voice still hoarse with sleep. "I hope I didn't make things too awkward last night." Lyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. She wanted to tell him that it wasn't his fault, that it wasn't just the awkwardness of their first night together. She wanted to tell him everything she had discovered, but she couldn't. Not yet. Not until she understood more about what all this meant. "I'm fine," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's just a lot to process for both of us." Jason nodded, sitting up slowly. "Yeah, I get that. This whole thing is huge. I didn't sign up for any of it, but I'll do my best to make sure this works. For Earth, for everyone." Lyra watched him for a moment, studying his face. He seemed sincere, and yet she couldn't fully trust him. Not yet. There was so much he didn't know about himself, about his past, and that made him dangerous. The prophecy spoke of a leader who could lead the viral to victory. Against their enemies, yes, but also against themselves. And Jason, with his human blood, might be the key to both their salvation and their downfall. "I need to show you something," Lyra said, her voice quiet but firm. She didn't give him a chance to respond, instead walking toward the hidden chamber in their room. Jason followed her, his curiosity piqued. Lyra reached a section of the wall that looked no different from the rest of the room. But with a touch of her hand, it opened silently, revealing a small, hidden compartment. Inside, there was a scroll, ancient and covered in dust. She picked it up carefully and handed it to Jason. "What is this?" Jason asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and resolve. This is the record of your bloodline. It was hidden away for a reason. Your family, Jason, is not what you think. You are part of an ancient legacy that has been forgotten by your people, and it's a legacy that the Viral have tried to erase. Jason took the scroll from her, unrolling it carefully. The writing on it was in an ancient language that he didn't understand, but there were symbols, markings that looked strangely familiar. His fingers traced the shapes as his mind raced. What was this? Why was he tied to it? I don't understand, Jason said, his voice trembling. What does this mean? Why is it so important? Lyra took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. Your ancestors helped the Viral win a great war many centuries ago. They were warriors, diplomats, and leaders. But after the war, your family vanished from history. The Viral feared that one day your bloodline would return to claim its rightful place, so they erased every trace of it. Jason looked at her, his heart pounding. Are you saying that I'm important, that I have some kind of power, some kind of destiny? Lyra nodded slowly. Yes, but it's not just about power. It's about the future. The prophecy speaks of a leader who will unite the Viral and humans. That leader is you. You are the key to ending the conflict between our peoples, but you must understand your past first. Jason was silent for a long moment, the weight of her words settling in. I don't know what to say, he finally muttered. This is a lot to take in. I'm just a guy from Earth. I don't even know how to be a leader, let alone the leader of two species. Lyra looked at him with a soft expression. You don't have to be perfect, Jason, but you have to understand that your actions will shape the future. You may not be ready now, but you will be. The words lingered in the air between them, heavy with the burden of what lay ahead. Jason felt overwhelmed, as if everything he had known had been turned upside down. He had come to this alien world thinking he was just a simple man, playing a small role in something much bigger. But now, everything had changed. Lyra stepped closer to him, her voice quiet. I didn't want this for you. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but you must know the truth. It's the only way for us to move forward. Jason swallowed hard, trying to process everything. And what now? What do we do with this knowledge? We must decide what path we will take, Lyra said. The Viral will come for us, Jason. They will want to control you, to use you for their own purposes. But if we can find a way to unite our people, to show them that we are stronger together, we can bring peace. Jason nodded slowly, the weight of his new reality pressing down on him. The man he thought he was, the man who had just wanted to protect Earth, was gone. In his place stood someone who had a larger purpose, a purpose he wasn't sure he was ready for. But somehow he knew that he had no choice but to face it. What do you want me to do? Jason asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. Lyra looked at him, her gaze softening. I need you to trust me, and I need you to trust yourself. The future of our people is in your hands. Jason took a deep breath and looked back at her, his expression resolute. Then I'll do what I can for Earth, for you, for all of us. Lyra nodded, her expression hardening again. Good, we'll begin tomorrow. There's much to be done. And with that, the tension between them grew thicker. Neither of them knew what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. The journey they were about to take together would change everything. Jason sat in the small, dimly lit room, staring at the floor. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more confusing than the last. The truth about his lineage had turned his life upside down. The life he had known, the life he thought he was building, no longer seemed real. Lyra's words echoed in his mind. He was part of an ancient prophecy, a leader destined to unite the Viral and humanity. But how could that be true? He had never thought of himself as anything special. He was just a man, a regular guy from Earth, trying to make his way in a world that felt completely foreign. Lyra had told him the truth, and yet she had been just as distant as ever. He couldn't blame her. She had just found out that the man she had married was not just a political pawn, but someone with the potential to change the future of their people. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do with this knowledge, let alone what Lyra expected from him. The Viral were a powerful species, and they were proud. Their history was full of stories of conquest and glory. For centuries, they had ruled over many planets, and their empire had been built on strength and honor. But Jason knew little of all that. He had grown up on Earth, where people barely understood the concept of space travel, let alone the politics of an intergalactic empire. He had been thrust into this world without asking for any of it. He stood up and walked to the window, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar cityscape outside. The streets were quiet, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the air. Lyra had said the viral would come for him, that they would try to control him and use his heritage for their own gain. But Jason wasn't sure how to stop them. He wasn't even sure he wanted to. The thought of leading the viral, of becoming the figurehead of a massive empire, made his stomach turn. He had never asked for any of this. His life was supposed to be simple, but now it was anything but. The weight of his new identity pressed down on him, and it felt like a burden he couldn't shake. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to find Lyra standing in the doorway. She was silent for a moment, as if deciding whether or not to speak. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed a sense of inner conflict. "I've been thinking," Lyra said quietly, "about what we discussed, about you and your role in all this." Jason didn't say anything. He knew she had her doubts just as he had his. They were both trapped in a situation they hadn't chosen, but they were here now and they had to deal with it. Lyra walked into the room, her movements graceful and deliberate. "I've spent my whole life serving the viral, serving my people. But this," she hesitated, choosing her words carefully, "this changes everything." Jason looked at her, his brow furrowing. "I don't know what to do, Lyra. I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to be part of some prophecy. I don't even know who I am anymore." Lyra stepped closer, her eyes softening slightly. "I know it's difficult, but you must understand something. The viral have been waiting for you, for someone like you, someone with your bloodline. They've been afraid of this moment for centuries." Jason shook his head, disbelief in his eyes. "I don't want to be anyone's weapon, Lyra. I don't want to lead an army. I just want to find a way to make peace between our people. That's all." Lyra sighed. "And that's what you must do, Jason. But you must also understand the reality of the situation. The viral will not let you live in peace. They will try to control you, to use you as a symbol of their power. You are a tool to them, even if they don't realize it yet." Jason looked out the window again, the weight of her words settling in. "Then what? What am I supposed to do? What happens when they come for me?" Lyra's gaze hardened, her expression becoming serious. "We have two choices. We can try to hide to protect you from the viral, but that would only delay the inevitable. Or we can take a stand. We can show them that you are not just a pawn. You are the future of our people, both viral and human." Jason turned to face her, his heart pounding. "And if they don't accept that? If they don't believe me?" Lyra's eyes flickered with a hint of something darker. "Then we will fight, but we will fight together, and we will do everything in our power to change the course of history." The silence between them grew heavy. Jason didn't know what to say. The idea of standing up to the viral, of fighting for something he had only just discovered, was terrifying. But there was a part of him that knew Lyra was right. The future of both species depended on him, and he couldn't back down now. "Okay," Jason said finally, his voice steady. "I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure this works, for Earth, for the viral, for both of us." Lyra nodded, her expression softening slightly. "You don't have to do this alone. I'm with you, Jason. We'll face whatever comes together." Jason felt a surge of determination wash over him. For the first time since learning the truth about his past, he felt a sense of purpose. It wasn't about power. It wasn't about leading armies or conquering worlds. It was about bringing two species together, about creating a future where both could thrive. The door to the room opened suddenly, interrupting their conversation. A tall, imposing figure stepped into the room, his presence immediately filling the space. Jason's heart skipped a beat. The man standing before them was one of the viral leaders, a member of the council that had orchestrated this entire marriage. His name was Terk, and he was a man of power, someone who had known the true significance of Jason's lineage long before Jason himself did. "Terk," Lyra said, her voice cold but respectful. "What are you doing here?" Terk's eyes locked with Jason's, his gaze piercing and unyielding. "I've come to speak with your husband, Lyra. The council requires his presence immediately." Jason stood up straighter, his chest tightening. He could feel the tension in the room, the weight of what was about to happen. He had been waiting for this moment, but he wasn't sure he was ready. "What does the council want with me?" Jason asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Terk's expression remained unreadable, but there was a hint of something else in his eyes. "The time has come for you to acknowledge your role, human. You are not just a symbol. You are the key to our future, and the viral will not allow you to hide in the shadows any longer." Jason exchanged a glance with Lyra, who nodded almost imperceptibly. She had known this moment would come, and now so had he. "I'm ready," Jason said, his voice firm despite the nervousness he felt. Terk's lips curled into a slight smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Good." Then come with me, the council awaits. Jason's heart pounded as he followed Terk out of the room, Lyra by his side. He didn't know what was going to happen next, but he knew one thing for certain: everything was about to change. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a leader, whether he liked it or not, and the fate of two species rested in his hands. Jason felt the weight of every step as he followed Terk through the cold, polished halls of the Viral Council building. The walls were covered in strange symbols, glowing softly in the dim light. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, a pressure that seemed to build with every passing moment. Lyra walked beside him, her steps silent but purposeful. She had been quiet ever since Terk arrived, her face an unreadable mask, but Jason could feel her presence beside him like a steady anchor. He wasn't sure what to expect when they reached the council room, but the feeling in his gut told him it wasn't going to be easy. Every part of him wanted to turn back, to find a way to escape all of this, to go back to the life he had once known. But deep down, he knew there was no going back. His life, and the future of both the Viral and humanity, depended on what happened next. The council room was unlike anything Jason had ever seen. The walls were made of smooth, black stone, and in the center of the room stood a large, round table. Around it sat several Viral leaders, their faces stern and their eyes cold. They didn't greet Jason, didn't acknowledge his presence. Instead, they simply stared at him, their gazes heavy, as though they were trying to see into his very soul. Jason felt a wave of unease wash over him, but he stood tall, trying to hold his ground. He couldn't show weakness, not now. This was it. This was the moment that would decide everything. Terk stepped forward and addressed the council in their ancient language, his voice low and commanding. Jason couldn't understand the words, but he could feel the intensity behind them. Terk spoke for what felt like an eternity, and when he finished, he turned to Jason, his eyes hard. "The council has gathered to hear from you, human," Terk said, his voice filled with authority. "You have been chosen not just by the Viral, but by your own bloodline. You are not here by chance. Your destiny is tied to the future of both our people." Jason swallowed hard, his throat dry. He knew what he had to say, but the words felt stuck in his throat. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about something far greater, something he didn't fully understand, but he had to try. "I understand that my bloodline is important," Jason began, his voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. "But I am not a weapon, and I am not here to be used by any of you. I came here to create peace, not war. The future of humanity and the future of the Viral depends on us working together, not on me leading anyone into battle." The room fell silent, and Jason felt every pair of eyes on him, weighing his every word. Lyra's gaze was soft but firm, and for the first time, Jason felt a sense of support from her. But the council, they remained silent, their faces unreadable. Terk's lips curled into a thin smile, but there was no warmth in it. "Peace, you say? Do you truly believe that peace is possible between our peoples, human? For centuries, the Viral have ruled with strength. We have fought countless battles, conquered entire star systems, and yet you expect us to lay down our arms and make peace with a species like yours. A species that can barely defend itself." Jason's heart pounded in his chest. He knew the Viral saw humanity as weak, as a species on the brink of destruction. They didn't understand Earth's people, their struggles, or their strength. Jason wasn't here to argue about who was stronger. He was here to show them that they had to change, that they couldn't keep fighting forever. "We don't need to be strong in the way you think," Jason said, his voice growing stronger. "We need to be strong in a different way. We need to find common ground, to share our knowledge and our resources. We need to stop seeing each other as enemies and start seeing each other as partners." There was a moment of silence, and Jason felt a chill run down his spine. The council members exchanged looks, their faces impassive. But then one of them spoke, a tall, older Viral with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. He leaned forward, his voice cold and steady. "Your words are noble, human," the Viral leader said, "but they are also naive. We have seen your kind for what they are, fragile, selfish, and weak. The Viral do not make alliances with those who cannot protect themselves, and yet here you stand, claiming that you are the one to unite us all." Jason's hands clenched into fists, his anger rising. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. They were dismissing him because he was human, because they couldn't see past their own pride and arrogance. But he wouldn't let that stop him. "I'm not here to prove that humanity is better than the Viral," Jason said, his voice calm but firm. I'm here to prove that we can be better together. We don't have to fight each other. We can build something new, something stronger than anything either of our species could do alone. Lyra stepped forward, her presence commanding. The human is right, she said, her voice steady and filled with conviction. For centuries, the Viral have relied on their power and their strength, but strength alone is not enough to secure the future. Jason has the power to lead, not because of his bloodline, but because of his vision. A vision that can unite us if we are willing to see it. For a long moment, the room was silent. The council members exchanged looks, their expressions hard and unreadable. Jason felt the tension in the air, the uncertainty of the moment. But then Terk spoke again, his voice cold but with a hint of something else, perhaps respect. You speak of peace, Terk said. But peace is a fragile thing. It can be broken in an instant, shattered by the smallest spark. And you, human, are the spark. Do you truly believe you can withstand the storm that will come when the Viral learn of your true heritage? Jason's heart skipped a beat. He had been prepared for this moment, but hearing Terk's words, the weight of the council's distrust, it was more than he had anticipated. He wasn't sure he could handle what was coming, but he had no choice. I don't have all the answers, Jason said, his voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside him. But I believe we can change, all of us. We can build a future where both our species can thrive. I'll fight for that no matter what it takes. Terk studied him for a long time, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded. You may have a point, human, but the Viral will not be easily swayed. You will have to prove yourself. If you can convince the council, if you can show us that you are not a threat, then perhaps there is hope. But if you fail, Jason met his gaze, unflinching. I won't fail. Terk's lips curled into a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. We shall see. With that, the council meeting ended. Jason stood in the room, his heart racing, his mind spinning. He had made his case, but he knew this was only the beginning. The Viral were a proud, ancient species. Convincing them to change would not be easy, but he had to try. As he and Lyra walked out of the council room, the weight of the decision ahead of them settled heavily on his shoulders. They had taken the first step. Now they had to see it through. There was no turning back. Jason looked at Lyra, her face unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something like hope. He wasn't sure if it was hope for him, for the future, or for the peace they both wanted. But it was there, and it was enough to keep him moving forward. I'm with you, Lyra said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. We'll do this together. Jason nodded, his resolve hardening. He wasn't just fighting for peace anymore. He was fighting for a future where humanity and the Viral could stand side by side. And no matter how difficult it was, he wouldn't stop until he saw that future realized. The days that followed the council meeting felt like a blur. Jason couldn't remember the last time he had felt so uncertain, so completely out of his depth. The weight of his new reality pressed on him from every angle. He wasn't just a man from Earth anymore. He was the key to an alliance that could change the future of both humanity and the Viral. He was the spark that could either ignite peace or destroy everything. Lyra was with him every step of the way, her presence both a comfort and a reminder of the task ahead. She had been quiet since their conversation with the council, but Jason could tell she was thinking, planning, just as much as he was. She had always been strong, and her confidence in him, even now, gave him a sense of determination he hadn't felt before. The council had given him a chance. Terk's words still echoed in his mind. Prove yourself human. Jason knew that this wasn't just about talking. It was about action. The Viral needed to see him take charge, to show them that he wasn't just some pawn in their game. He had to demonstrate that he could lead, that he could bring about the peace he'd promised. But how? How could a human, someone so unprepared, lead an empire of warriors and conquerors? He didn't have all the answers, but he was determined to find them. The first step, he decided, was to show the Viral that humanity had something valuable to offer. It wasn't about military strength or the ability to conquer. It was about knowledge, diplomacy, and the will to change. He knew he had to get through to them, to make them see that their future depended on more than just their pride and power. Jason, we need to meet with the council again, Lyra said one morning, breaking him from his thoughts. They'll want to hear more from you. The pressure's only going to get worse from here. Jason looked at her, his heart heavy. I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't know if I can convince them. They want a leader, Lyra, someone strong, someone who can control everything. I'm not that person. Lyra's eyes softened, but her voice remained steady. You don't have to be, you just have to be yourself. The council wants strength, yes, but they also want something real. They want someone who understands the importance of unity. They want a leader who can bring both our peoples together, not just a symbol of power. Jason nodded slowly, taking in her words. She was right. He didn't have to be a warrior, a king, or even a diplomat. He just had to be someone who was willing to stand up and fight for the future. And that was something he could do. The day of the meeting arrived faster than Jason expected. He had spent the past few days preparing, gathering what little knowledge he had about the viral and their history. He'd been trying to learn everything he could, trying to find a way to speak to them, to show them that humanity had something of value. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew one thing. This was his chance to make a difference. As he and Lyra walked into the council room, the familiar tension in the air hit him immediately. The council members were already seated, their faces serious and watchful. Terk was at the head of the table, his eyes scanning Jason as if measuring him, sizing him up. Lyra stepped forward first, her voice calm but authoritative. "We are here to continue our discussions, as promised. Jason has come to speak to you today to share his vision for our future." Jason felt the weight of every gaze on him, but he stood tall. This was it. He couldn't back down now. He couldn't show fear. He had to be strong for Earth, for the viral, and for himself. "I know you all have doubts," Jason began, his voice steady but filled with determination. "I know you see me as nothing more than a human, someone from a primitive world, but I also know that humanity has something to offer. We may not have the power or the resources of the viral, but we have something just as important, the ability to change." He paused, letting the words sink in. The council members were silent, watching him with unreadable expressions. Terk's gaze never wavered. "You want strength," Jason continued. "You want power, but what happens when you've conquered everything? What happens when there's nothing left to fight for? The viral have been at war for centuries. You've built your empire on conquest, but what have you truly gained? What's left when there's no one else to defeat?" There was a murmur of tension in the room, but Jason pressed on. "We don't have to keep fighting, Terk. We don't have to keep conquering. What we need is something new, something better. We need to work together to share knowledge, to build something that lasts. The viral and humanity can both thrive, but only if we stop seeing each other as enemies. We need to start seeing each other as partners, not competitors." Jason's words hung in the air. He didn't know if the council was listening, if they were even open to hearing him. But he had to believe they could. He had to believe that the future of both their peoples depended on this moment. Terk stood up suddenly, his expression cold and hard. "You speak of peace, human, but peace is a fragile thing. It can break with the smallest spark. And what happens then? What happens when you fail?" Jason's heart raced, but he didn't back down. "Then we try again, we don't give up. Peace is never easy, but it's worth fighting for. And if we fail, we learn from it. We grow." For a long moment, Terk stared at him, his gaze intense and calculating. Then slowly he sat down, nodding to the council members. They exchanged looks, their eyes filled with uncertainty. Jason could see it. There was a crack in their defenses, a sliver of doubt that hadn't been there before. "We are not convinced," Terk said finally, his voice quieter now. "But you have given us something to think about. Perhaps there is a future where we can work together, but this is not a decision we can make lightly. The viral have their pride, and our people will not accept such a radical shift easily." Jason nodded, knowing the fight was far from over. "I understand. But I'm asking for a chance to prove that we can do this, that we can make it work." The council members were still silent, but there was a shift in the room. A quiet understanding seemed to settle over them, as if they were finally beginning to see what Jason had been trying to say. It wasn't about strength or power. It wasn't about conquering or ruling. It was about working together, about building something new. Terk's voice broke the silence. "We will give you time, human. We will give you a chance to prove your words, but do not mistake this for acceptance. The viral are not easily swayed. If you fail, there will be consequences." Jason felt the weight of Terk's words, but he didn't flinch. "I won't fail." The council meeting ended without any clear resolution, but for the first time since arriving on the viral homeworld, Jason felt a sense of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. The viral weren't ready to fully embrace his vision of peace, but they were listening. That was a start. As he and Lyra left the council room, the tension that had filled the space began to fade. Jason was exhausted, both mentally and emotionally. He had put everything on the line, but he knew it wasn't over yet. The real work was just beginning. You did well, Lyra said softly, her voice filled with something he couldn't quite place, pride, maybe, or hope. Jason smiled faintly, though it was tired. It's not over yet. But I'm not giving up. And with that, they walked forward, knowing that the future was still uncertain, but at least now there was a chance. A chance for peace, a chance for humanity and the viral to build a future together.